Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Anna Marsik, starting right now with a live look over the White House. The latest right now on the shooting incident that happened at the White House Correspondents Dinner. 31-year-old Cole Allen appeared in federal court today for his detention hearing. I did speak with a criminal defense attorney about today's developments, so let's listen into that here on Live Now from Fox. The suspect in the White House Correspondents Dinner shooting is set to remain in custody. 31-year-old Cole Allen appeared in federal court on Thursday for his detention hearing. So joining us to break down today's developments is criminal defense attorney Silva Megerditchian. First things first, let's just talk about what did we learn today and how does this impact the case moving forward?
Absolutely. Well, we learned a lot. We learned that he wants to stay in custody. The defendant wants to stay in custody, which made sense. You know, it's interesting because he wrote this manifesto really quite detailed about his intentions, about his motivations. So it makes sense that he would actually not try to get out. I know his defense attorneys tried. We also found out that he's going to remain in custody and come back on May 12th. And the fact of the matter is we also know what he's charged with. The fact that he's charged with the attempted assassination of the president, a life count, the fact that he transported weapons across state lines, another federal charge that carries a 10-year minimum term, and discharge of a firearm, which again is a mandatory minimum of 10 years and could carry a life sentence. So we learned all of this today, but I'm curious to see what ballistics will bring out. We don't absolutely know if the weapon is discharged. Again, speaking as a defense attorney, I would really want those ballistics evidence details to come out.
So in a court filing Wednesday, Allen's public defenders had emphasized that his gainful employment and his lack of a prior record to argue for release. If the court is viewing him maybe as somebody who had it together up until the moment of that attack, does that help the prosecution prove premeditation? How does the defense pivot from he's a good guy to he was not in his right mind without appearing to be contradicting?
You know, the defense is doing their job, right? They want to show that this was a young man who had a huge future ahead of him. He was educated, he had a great job. It sounds like neighbors actually thought he was a nice person. But the problem is, and we see this a lot in young adults between the ages of 21 to about 35 years old, where we do have breaks. And obviously, this man had some sort of psychotic break. But what prosecutors can use is, despite any kind of mental illness, the manifesto was quite well written. We know that the New York Post had brought out the manifesto in full. It was coherent. It almost had a pathway to exactly what his thought process was. And that, I think, counts against the defense. The fact that it was so premeditated, so detailed, so well written. This wasn't a manifesto of different, fake imagery or random thoughts. He seemed very much to understand what he wanted to do and how to implement it. So I think that aspect helps the prosecutors. But what helps the defense is this was out of nowhere. This young man had no criminal history. But at the same time, what counters the defense arguments is it seems like there was a history of troublesome media posts, social media posts. And again, we're going to get all of his electronic dumps to see exactly what he had posted and see how long this kind of thought process was going on for. So we are such at the preliminary stage of understanding. It's going to be interesting to see what comes out with the last few years of his internet history.
Cole Allen's defense team chose to concede to detention today rather than fighting for bail. From your experience, is this maybe a tactical move to buy time for a mental health evaluation or simply maybe a recognition of just the high volume of evidence presented by the DOJ?
There was no way that the court was going to release this young man. There's no way. He is charged with some of the highest crimes even possible. But again, the defense is doing their job. They have to defend their client. They have an ethical obligation to do the best job they can. So a mental health evaluation is not only something they should do, but they must do in order for ethical representation. And honestly, we want to understand if we can prevent this type of behavior, if we're able to understand why, we can prevent future behavior in others. And as a defense attorney, it's very important for me to understand my client's motivations in order to prevent, future issues. So the defense has to do their job. They have to do it in a way that not only attacks the evidence, but also really goes into their client's history, understanding what was going on, and could there be a psychotic break that can actually help them with mitigation, but it won't set him free. That, again, this was a highly publicized correspondents dinner. There is so much video and so many witnesses. It's going to be a very high bar for the defense to fight, for sure.
And earlier you mentioned, maybe some of his social media posts being used as evidence. The prosecution did release a mirror selfie of Allen that was taken just 30 minutes before that incident. In a high stakes federal case like this one, how much weight does a specific piece of maybe intent evidence carry compared to the physical act itself?
You know what? In this day and age of defending clients, it is absolutely imperative and evidence that the jury and the public take very seriously. Everything we write, everything we post can become evidence and be used against us. And this young man he sent the manifesto 10 minutes before the occurrence, the pictures, the selfies. He sent an apology letter to his employer saying, "You're not going to like what I'm about to do." He even called himself in writing the friendly federal assassin. He has done himself no favors. And this day and age, everything that is written, everything that is stated, everything that is posted on social media can and will be used against you, and honestly is as big evidence, as important evidence as actual ballistics evidence. It's as important to show premeditation. It's as important to show intent. I even say, as we sit, sometimes what is written is even more important than direct evidence because it shows exactly what the defendant was thinking at the time of the offense. So again, it's such a high bar for this defense. But again, when you're going into one of the most publicized events in the United States of America, the Correspondents' Dinner, this is expected. It's going to be a very, very interesting few months to see all of the evidence that comes out.
And to kind of go off of that, the DOJ is citing Allen's personal journals and that pre-scheduled message as proof of premeditation. How does a defense attorney begin to counter a paper trail that seems to explicitly outline a plan for this assassination attempt?
Is where the defense is really hard. The only thing they could say really is that the words don't necessarily mean that he wanted to do this. They will try to argue maybe a cloudy mental intent, maybe the fact that he felt that way, but at the time, if they can show ballistically, maybe the firearm did not discharge, maybe the security official was shot maybe by friendly fire. We don't know. We're waiting for ballistics. Maybe they can have some sort of argument that when he was running away, he was trying to abandon his plan. But again, as a defense attorney, we don't know all of the facts yet as being a member of the public, since I don't have a direct involvement in the case. But the defense attorneys right now, it's very early. They're going to really have to spend their time analyzing the direct evidence along with everything he wrote. Because just like he wrote about his intent, could there be writings saying, "I would never hurt anybody, I would never hurt a fly"? That could become something that could be mitigation. But again, when the eyes of the world are on you, it's very difficult to really have an effective defense. I think they're going to really try to focus on mitigation as much as possible.
The U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro's office highlighted Allen's alleged belief that anybody attending the dinner was a legitimate target. How does that expand the potential charges that he could face, perhaps involving maybe domestic terrorism even or hate crime enhancements?
Oh, everything's on the table, and in fact, they had stated that. I think that was stated that we still don't have a full encapsulation of what the charges will be. I do anticipate more charges. I do anticipate amended charges depending on the ballistics. But we know definitively that from that manifesto, the targets were real, and it looked like the targets were anybody who could have been at that correspondence dinner. And he even stated stated that the Trump administration were his targets, those words alone are so dire in their connotation that the intent is so implicit and explicit that, again, we'll see what comes out. The investigation is just starting. And so to see what it uncovers, I would anticipate additional charges being levied against this young man.
So, with Cole Allen's preliminary hearing now set for May 11th, what should we expect the defense to be doing behind the scenes during this window?
Absolutely, experts in investigation. I always say the best defense is a defense that has their experts together. They're going to want their own cell phone experts. They're going to want their own investigators. They're going to want their own ballistics expert. They're going to try to mitigate the most severe of the charges because remember, the worst charge he's facing is the assassination attempt of the president. They're going to try to do everything in their power to say, President Trump was never the intended target. But the more and more we're seeing the paperwork come out about what he actually wrote, that's going to be kind of difficult for them to show. But they have to have their experts lined up in order to fight all of the evidence that the prosecutors will bring forward. And at this point, to not do that would just not be effective assistance of counsel. So they're really going to put everything into getting the adequate experts to fight whatever comes out.
All right, Silva, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. We really appreciate it here on Live Now from Fox.